Listen very carefully, because what I'm about to say will either wake you up or expose you. Life does not reward the man who chases. Life rewards the man who waits, who watches, who moves only when reality bends in his direction. Most men don't fail because they are weak. They fail because they cling. They beg. They overextend. They leak energy the way fools leak secrets. And nothing repels power faster than desperation. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. A man who needs nothing becomes the man everything quietly moves toward. When you stop chasing, you stop bleeding out your worth. You stop negotiating with your own value. You stop handing the world the privilege of deciding what you're worth. And people feel it. They feel the shift before you even speak. They feel your silence before your mouth opens. They feel your presence before you step into the room. Because real power is never loud. Power is controlled. Power is cold. Power is the man who knows he can walk away from anything and anyone without losing himself. If you're ready to step into that version of yourself, say this out loud and drop it in the comments like you're carving it into stone. I do not chase. I align. Say it. Own it. Let it mark the end of the old you. Now we begin. The first shift is brutal and liberating at the same time. The withdrawal of the unnecessary. The moment you finally stop chasing, something ruthless happens inside you. The world that once felt loud, demanding, chaotic, starts to go quiet. The noise you used to drown in becomes background. The pull you used to feel toward everyone and everything weakens. And in that silence, you start to see clearly. You start seeing who actually deserved your energy and who only survived off your pursuit. The painful truth is this. Most people were not drawn to you. They were drawn to your effort, to your availability, to the way you reached outward instead of inward. They were addicted to your chasing. Machiavelli warned that a ruler loses authority the moment he appears too eager, too hungry for approval, too willing to prove himself. The same law applies to you. The second your need becomes visible, your value starts to decay in other people's eyes. So when you withdraw your unnecessary attention, the balance of power shifts instantly. You stop feeding illusions that gave you nothing back. You stop rewarding people who never contributed. You stop letting everyone walk into the kingdom of your presence like it's a public playground. Your time stops being an open market. Here's the part almost no one tells you. The moment you stop trying to be chosen, you become the one who chooses. That's when alignment begins. Because alignment requires space. And space only appears when you're willing to let go. Let go of the conversations that go nowhere. Let go of the people who only love you when you're convenient. Let go of the situations where your effort is the only thing keeping it alive. If you understand this shift, anchor it. I do not chase. I choose. Say it so your mind remembers what your past self was too scared to admit. Then comes the second shift. Learning the psychology of pulling instead of pursuing. Most men live in emotional debt. They are constantly paying others with approval, with validation, with attention just so they can feel noticed for a moment. They think reaching outward is connection, but it's dependency in disguise. Power does not bloom in the man who reaches outward. It blooms in the man who becomes a gravitational force. Dark psychology makes one thing painfully clear. Humans are drawn to what they cannot fully read, control, or access. The moment you stop chasing, you stop broadcasting your intentions. You stop explaining yourself to people who never earned that access. You stop advertising your need. And suddenly, you become unpredictable, dangerously unpredictable. People fear what they can't define. but they're magnetized by it at the same time. They start watching you more carefully. They replay your words. They notice your silence. They wonder when you changed, how you changed, and what you now know that they don't. Machiavellian philosophy teaches that influence is not gained by shouting your worth. It's gained by withholding it, by creating distance, by becoming the man whose presence must be earned, not consumed like free samples. When you stop pursuing others, you create a psychological vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. They start leaning in. They start chasing clarity. They start trying to access what they once took for granted. They think they're drawn to your new silence. They're not. They're drawn to the certainty you finally carry. You become the storm they can sense, but never predict. You become the exception in a world of men begging for scraps of attention. This shift is not arrogance, it's alignment. It's the moment you stop negotiating your identity with people who never even negotiated theirs. It's when you finally understand that what is truly meant for you does not require a chase. It requires a presence so solid that the world has no choice but to adjust around you. This is where becoming untouchable begins. Not when the world validates you, but when you no longer move from fear, only from inevitability. If this is hitting something deep inside you, don't just nod and scroll. Say this and claim it. Power comes to me. Not, I hope power notices me. Not, maybe one day I'll be worthy. Power comes to me. Say it like you're rewriting the contract between you and your reality. Say it like you're done begging and ready to start attracting. Because from here on, your movement has to match that sentence. Now we step into the third shift, the art of strategic absence and calculated presence. There comes a moment in every powerful man's evolution when he realizes something terrifying and liberating at the same time. Silence is not the absence of noise. Silence is a weapon. And absence is not retreat. Absence is strategy. When you finally stop chasing, you're not vanishing. You're repositioning. You're stepping out of the chaos and into the shadows, where real power gathers, grows, and sharpens without needing an audience. Machiavelli knew that a ruler should never reveal every move he's about to make, because the unseen threat is always more intimidating than the visible one. A visible knife can be dodged. A hidden blade lives in everyone's imagination. The same psychology applies to your life. When people can predict you, they can control you. When they can read you, they can use you. When they can access you whenever they want, they begin to devalue the privilege of your presence. Strategic absence is the art of stepping back with purpose, not out of fear, not out of insecurity, but out of discipline and self-respect. It's the moment you stop treating your presence like a discount product and start treating it like something rare. You pull away not because you're weak, but because you're refining your world. And when you reappear, you do not appear as the same man. You show up colder, calmer, more composed, and far less willing to entertain the chaos you once allowed to orbit you. People feel this recalibration. They feel when they no longer live rent-free in your mind. They feel when their opinions no longer shape your decisions. They feel when the doors to your energy are no longer wide open. They sense the walls going up, the gates closing, the fortress forming. You're no longer the man who chases outcomes. You're the man who architects them. You're no longer chasing rooms to belong to. You're becoming the room everyone wants access to. And this shift terrifies the people who are feeding off your old patterns. Your absence exposes their dependence. Your distance reveals their need. Your calm shows them just how loud, chaotic, and unstable they've been this entire time. Your presence becomes a privilege, not a routine. Your time becomes an asset, not a sacrifice. Your attention becomes rare, And as every serious student of dark psychology knows, scarcity creates desire every single time. You don't have to beg anyone to value you. You just have to stop giving yourself away on clearance. When you master this, a deeper truth clicks into place. You do not need to chase what is meant for you. Not when your name starts to carry weight. Not when your aura speaks louder than your explanations. Not when your silence demands more respect than your old arguments ever did. This is your Machiavellian edge. Controlled distance, deliberate timing, and the willingness to let people feel your absence long enough to finally understand your worth. If you can feel this transformation building inside you, even if it's just a spark right now, lock it in with this phrase: my silence is power. Say it like a vow. My silence is power. Because in a world where everyone is oversharing, over-explaining, overreacting, your controlled quiet becomes a storm. Now we step into the fourth shift, the sovereignty of a man who no longer seeks permission. When you stop chasing, you reclaim a throne you didn't even realize you had abandoned, the throne of your own sovereignty. That inner kingdom where self-respect, discipline, and cold clarity dictate every decision you make. Most men spend their entire lives unconsciously begging for permission. Permission to be valued. Permission to exist in someone's world. Permission to take up space. Permission to rise. They trade their crown for a scrap of validation, then sit there confused, wondering why no one treats them like a king. How could they? You handed your power away in exchange for attention that was never even secure. But the moment you stop chasing, everything reverses. You stop asking for a seat at the table. You realize you can build your own. You stop waiting for someone to see your potential. You start acting like the man you know you can become. You stop looking outward for a green light that was always supposed to come from within. You finally understand a brutal truth. No one gives power to the man who behaves like he needs it. Power is drawn to certainty, and certainty is born in the man who trusts his own judgment more than he trusts the shifting approval of others. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But fear, in its deeper sense, is not terror. It's respect. It's the recognition that you are not easily swayed, that you cannot be cheaply bought or emotionally tamed. When you no longer chase, people begin to respect your boundaries, not because you shouted about them, but because your behavior makes them undeniable. You stop breaking your own rules just to keep people around. You stop abandoning your standards just to feel temporarily accepted. You stop shrinking your identity to fit into spaces that were never built to hold your full weight. And every time you refuse to chase, you're sending a silent message into the minds of everyone around you. I answer to myself. And that sentence carries more weight than any speech you could ever give. People can feel when a man answers only to himself. It changes the atmosphere around him. It changes the dynamic of every room he walks into. It changes the way others speak to him, the way they approach him, the way they measure themselves around him. Dark psychology reveals a simple truth. Humans instinctively follow the man who is self-directed, internally anchored, and emotionally unmoved by external chaos. They gravitate toward the man who doesn't scramble for approval. They trust the man who stands still while everyone else is shaking. And most importantly, they respect the man who can look at loss without collapsing. Here's the Machiavellian twist. When you stop chasing, you stop fearing the consequences of being alone. Solitude sharpens you. It doesn't break you. You learn that your value doesn't shrink when someone walks away. It expands because your energy is no longer leaking into places where it was never appreciated. You learn that what leaves your life either teaches you or frees you, and either outcome strengthens you. You learn that the world bends for the man who bends for no one. And once you internalize that truth, you stop negotiating with your own potential. You stop shrinking your ambition to keep small-minded people comfortable. You stop giving discounts on your presence just to feel included. You start moving like a man who knows he is the prize, not because you declared it, but because you finally live like it. If you're ready to rule your inner kingdom without apology, say it in the comments. Anchor it inside your identity. I answer only to my purpose. Let it echo in your mind as we move into one of the most dangerous stages a man can reach, the cold ascension. This is the stage where something inside you shifts permanently, where you stop moving like a seeker and start moving like a force, where you stop trying to fit into the world and start bending the world to your internal structure. This moment is the birth of the cold ascension, the transformation from a man who chases outcomes to a man who architects them with precision. When you stop chasing, your energy rises to a frequency that only the self-governed can recognize. You become intentional. You become measured. You become intimidating without trying. You stop pouring your energy into people who never earned it. You stop spending your time explaining why you're leveling up. You stop asking for opinions before making decisions that elevate your life. Machiavelli wrote that men must either be won over or destroyed. And your new detachment, without you saying a word, accomplishes both. For some people, your absence becomes a relief. They never valued you, and now they are free from pretending. For others, your withdrawal becomes a psychological earthquake that exposes how dependent they were on your old patterns. But for you, your detachment becomes liberation. You no longer chase being liked. You chase being aligned. You no longer chase being chosen. You choose yourself. And this shift creates a ripple in your environment that others cannot ignore. Dark psychology shows that humans subconsciously respect the man who moves without hesitation, the man who acts without seeking permission, who does not justify his decisions, who does not fear leveling up even if others can't follow. This type of man is dangerous because he is unpredictable, and unpredictability is the birthplace of power. When people don't know what you'll do next, they stop taking you for granted. They stop assuming you'll always be available. They stop expecting you to prioritize their comfort over your destiny. And slowly, their behavior shifts not because you demanded it, but because your transformation forces them to recalibrate around you. You evolve from a man who chased certainty into a man who creates it, from a man who sought validation into a man whose presence validates itself. You begin noticing that the opportunities you used to run after now start approaching you. The people who once ignored you now study you. The ones who underestimated you now mention your name with caution. The world responds differently to a man who no longer fears loss, because a man who does not fear loss cannot be controlled, and that man becomes untouchable. Here is the secret that only a few ever learn. When you become the source of your own worth, you no longer collapse under rejection, you no longer chase attention, and you no longer negotiate your identity just to feel accepted. You become the storm that does not fold, the fire that does not dim, the force that does not soften to make others comfortable. Anyone who approaches you now must come with respect, with intention, and with alignment, or they simply won't be allowed near you. If this speaks to the man you're becoming, claim it now. I rise without permission. Let this become the rhythm of your ascent, because the next stage is even colder. The power of indifference. This is the moment when a man realizes that the world bends not to the strongest, not to the loudest, not to the most talented, but to the one who does not need anything from it. Indifference is not apathy. It is emotional discipline, the art of wanting nothing while attracting everything. When you stop chasing approval, affection, opportunity, attention, validation, you cut the psychological strings that once controlled your life. Suddenly you are no longer reactive, you are sovereign. Machiavelli taught that a ruler must never reveal desperation. Why? Because desperation makes a man predictable. And a predictable man is a controllable man. But indifference, calm, unbothered, self-contained indifference turns you into something entirely different. A man who cannot be bribed by praise. A man who cannot be broken by rejection. A man who cannot be owned by desire. And here is the dark twist most will never understand. The moment you no longer need someone, they become more interested in needing you. Humans chase emotional scarcity. They orbit whatever feels rare. They pursue what they cannot easily sway. Your indifference becomes a mirror that exposes their insecurity, and that mirror pulls them closer, not because you asked, but because you detached. This is how the man who stops chasing becomes the man everything quietly moves toward. If this is landing in your bones, keep reading. The ascent has only begun. Indifference is a transformation, not a performance. You can't fake it. You earn it through solitude, through self-respect, through facing the parts of yourself you used to drown under noise, distraction, and emotional dependency. When you master indifference, your entire operating system changes. You stop reacting and start selecting. You stop pleading and start observing. You stop hoping for alignment and start requiring it. You no longer chase potential, you study patterns. You no longer cling to attachments, you measure their cost. You no longer fear being alone, you fear wasting your life on the wrong people. And every time you choose yourself over temporary comfort, your inner world sharpens. People see the difference immediately. Your silence stops looking passive, it starts looking calculated. Your calm stops looking soft, it starts looking commanding. Your distance stops looking confused, it starts looking controlled. Machiavelli's principles thrive here. A man who needs nothing negotiates from a position of absolute leverage. When you're not desperate for an outcome, you gain the ability to watch others reveal their intentions. They talk more, they try harder, they over-explain, over-apologize, overreact. The moment they realize they no longer have power over you, their weaknesses surface on their own. Meanwhile, you remain still, quiet, unmoved. Dark psychology teaches this. The one who controls his emotions controls the dynamic. Every single time. When you detach, you gain clarity. You make decisions by logic, not longing. You walk away not because you're angry, but because the situation no longer aligns with the man you're becoming. This is what makes you untouchable. Not coldness for ego's sake, but mastery of your internal state. You become the man who listens more than he speaks, who observes more than he reacts, who chooses more than he chases. And slowly, the entire world recalibrates around you. People approach you with caution and respect. Opportunities flow toward you. Your self-worth strengthens because it is no longer dependent on anything external. Your life begins aligning without force because you finally stopped working against yourself. This is the essence of the Machiavellian man. He does not chase power. He becomes the kind of man power recognizes. He does not compete for attention. His presence is the attention. He does not seek validation. His certainty validates itself. You become a man who is harder to influence, harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to break. And that alone elevates you above most men still living on emotional autopilot. If this resonates, anchor it. I need nothing. I command everything. Let it imprint itself deeper, because the next stage is the shadow crown, the invisible authority earned through emotional immunity. This is when your self-mastery becomes unmistakable. Emotional immunity is not numbness. It is sovereignty over your inner world. It's the realization that your emotions are your soldiers meant to obey you, not overthrow you. Most men crumble because they seek emotional comfort more than emotional strength. They run to anything that soothes them instead of mastering what shapes them. They want the world to calm their fears instead of becoming the kind of man fear cannot hold. But emotional immunity changes everything. You stop being pulled by people's intentions. You start seeing the truth behind their actions without the fog of attachment or insecurity. Their praise no longer inflates you. Their disrespect no longer breaks you. Their approval no longer validates you. Their absence no longer wounds you. You move with a cold clarity that others feel instantly. You are no longer controlled by what controls them. Dark psychology reveals this. Humans naturally follow the emotionally stable because stability feels like safety. People trust the man who cannot be shaken. They are drawn to the man whose calm remains unbroken. Your emotional mastery becomes a magnetic field. People orbit you because your mind feels like solid ground. But understand something profound. Emotional immunity does not isolate you. It refines you. You don't lock your heart. You lock your standards. You don't avoid connection. You avoid chaos. You don't reject vulnerability. You reject manipulation. You become a man who will walk away the moment someone treats your presence like an afterthought. A man who refuses to collapse into the smallness others try to force him into. A man who will cut off access before he ever cuts down his own dignity. This is where your shadow crown forms. When you rule yourself so completely that no one else can rule you. This is why your silence starts carrying weight. This is why your boundaries become unquestionable. This is why people listen when you speak, because they can feel the discipline behind your words. The Machiavellian paradox appears here. The more emotionally immune you become, the more influence you gain. You speak less, people listen more. You give less, people offer more. You reveal less, people invest more. You detach more, people pursue more. Not because you demanded it, but because your internal throne is no longer vacant. You finally sit on it. If this resonates, carve the next phrase into your identity. My mind is my throne. And once that truth settles, you enter the next stage. A stage most men never reach because it demands mastery over the most dangerous force inside you. Desire. The calculated heart. This is where you stop being ruled by desire and begin ruling desire itself. This is the final ascent. The moment where everything you've built internally merges into one unshakable identity. And it begins with mastering the force that secretly governs most men, desire. Most men chase because they have not mastered desire. They want affection, attention, validation, opportunity, and in wanting, they expose their deepest vulnerabilities. But desire itself is not the enemy. The enemy is becoming a servant to your own wanting. A man whose desires control him is a man the world can easily move. Predict him, tempt him, redirect him, break him. A man who exposes what he wants exposes the strings others can pull. Machiavelli warned that a ruler who cannot restrain his desires becomes weak in the hands of anyone who understands them. But the man who holds his desires with calm discipline, revealing nothing, moving only when it benefits him, becomes strategically dangerous. Dark psychology reveals a simple law. What is easily accessed becomes undervalued. What is constantly available becomes ignored. What reveals itself too quickly becomes dismissed. So when you stop chasing, you are not abandoning desire, you are mastering it. You choose when to reveal it. You choose who deserves it. You choose where it flows and where it does not. You stop desiring people who drain you. You stop desiring validation that weakens you. You stop desiring outcomes rooted in insecurity, and the world senses this evolution. People feel that your attention is no longer free. Your effort is no longer automatic. Your presence is no longer something they can casually step into. Your restraint becomes a signal of power. Your selectiveness becomes a mark of value. Your silence becomes something they study rather than disregard. Desire flips. Power flips. The dynamic flips. Suddenly, you become the prize. And this transformation sets the stage for one of the rarest milestones in a man's development, the unbending frame. Your values become immovable. Your identity becomes anchored. Your boundaries become the architecture of every interaction around you. Most men bend because they want to be liked. They compromise because they fear loss. They soften because they crave acceptance. But the man who has stopped chasing stands firm, and the world adjusts around him. The weak resent him. The insecure test him. The entitled push him. But the aligned, the ones worthy of being in his world, rise to meet the standard. Your frame begins filtering your entire life without effort. You no longer chase connection. You evaluate it. You no longer tolerate disrespect. You walk away from it. You no longer negotiate your non-negotiables. You uphold them. People recalibrate their behavior around you because you have become defined where others remain shapeless. And once your frame becomes unbending, a deeper realization emerges. You do not fear losing people anymore. You fear losing yourself. This is when your aura changes. Your silence grows heavier. Your boundaries sharpen. Your presence becomes felt before you speak. Not because you intimidate intentionally, though many will feel intimidated, but because self-mastery radiates authority. And this leads you into the final transformation of all, alignment. This is where everything you've practiced, your restraint, your silence, your emotional immunity, your controlled desire, your stable frame, fuses into one identity. You stop reacting to life. You start directing it. You stop begging for opportunities. You attract them. You stop fearing loss. You embrace alignment. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold. But the deeper truth is this: fortune favors the man who governs himself completely. Your life becomes a chessboard. You move with intention instead of impulse. You choose alignment over approval. You refuse to explain standards that are rooted in your sovereignty. You detach from anything that disturbs your purpose. You walk away from anyone who insults your worth. You stop justifying your evolution to those who lack the depth to understand it. And slowly, without force, your world begins to align. The right people appear, not because you chase them, but because you elevated yourself to a level they cannot ignore. The right opportunities unfold, not because you repeated old patterns, but because you stepped into a new identity. The wrong distractions fall away, not because you fought them, but because they no longer match your frequency. Your aura thickens. Your influence sharpens. Your presence expands. Because now you are no longer searching for power. You are power. You are no longer hoping for alignment. You create alignment. You are no longer chasing life. Life begins chasing you. If this final stage resonates with the man you're becoming, anchor it with the last declaration: I align my world. Say it as the closing line of your old identity and the first command of the man you are stepping into. In the end, everything comes back to one truth. Life does not align for the man who chases. It aligns for the man who commands himself. When your silence becomes deliberate, your standards become unbending, and your desire becomes controlled, you stop moving like someone hoping to be chosen. You move like someone impossible to ignore. This is the essence of the Machiavellian ascent. Self-mastery first, power second, alignment always. The moment you choose yourself without apology, the world begins rearranging in your favor. Opportunities sharpen. People reveal themselves. Your path clears. You no longer force anything. You no longer fear anything. You no longer need anything to validate who you are. Because now, you move as a man aligned with his purpose, his power, and his throne. Say it one last time and mean it. I align my world.